And we're back, and we're moving into our second conversation for today. There's a lot happening with COVID, but that doesn't mean we can't ignore other major issues happening in our country. And this one, I believe we need to give attention to, and we need to talk about it honestly and openly. So the Belize Defence Force has been, there was an investigation done into allegations of sexual abuse, sexual misconduct, and here to digest that report with us, we have a retired captain from the Belize Defence Force, Derricia Castillo. Good morning.
Good morning.
Hi, morning.
So, Derricia, we were talking off camera, and I do want to acknowledge that it is, or maybe I should just ask you, how difficult is it for you to speak out on these issues related to the BDF?
Well, this cycle, I'll say this cycle, after the report being out or after understanding whatever came out of the investigation has been easier. In January, it was a bit difficult because calls were made from the ministry, calls were made from different people within a lot of levels of echelon within not only the Ministry of National Security, but within the Belize Defence Force, to my family members and friends and people that they thought were close to me, trying to silence me and having me just let go of the entire situation, which of course fueled me more, because if there was really an interest to fix the situation, they would see the advocacy that I'm doing as a way of not acknowledging there's a problem, but for someone who was in the system to actually say, hey, there is a problem. Because within the military, there's an entire ego which comes with, we're here to protect, we're here to serve, we're stronger than the average person. So to actually accept or think that the Belize Defence Force would accept that there was a problem, I mean, I wasn't even reaching out to that part. So I thought that it would have been embraced, that I'm speaking out about the culture and about flaws which exist, to get entities outside of the Belize Defence Force to actually assist. But I'm guessing not everyone's like that way.
Well, I mean, especially, I think some will assume that as a female, especially speaking out, you are seen as on the side of those who are making the allegations. And you know, we've heard from you several times in the news. I really appreciate you having this conversation live with us this morning, because it really is concerning, the stories that are coming out. You know, when we first got that report in January, where the recruits specifically were talking about the sexual misconduct there, I think it's disturbing. And what is worse is that we hear that this is a common practice, that it's almost established or ingrained in how things have been happening there. Would you agree?
Yeah, I mean, it's been beyond recruit training that these reports have been made. Yeah. And I will stress on the word culture. I know there has been statements made to try and take us away from using the word culture when it comes to rape within the Belize Defence Force. But I think it's very important to understand that what exists within the Belize Defence Force is a culture of rape. It is a culture of sexual harassment. It is a culture of sexual misconduct, especially towards the women in the Belize Defence Force. I cannot honestly sit here and say that the culture does not impact the men within the Belize Defence Force as well, because there has been allegations of women within who reach within superior levels within the Belize Defence Force who have used tactics like these against men as well. So, however, the more prevalent cases are those of the women. So I do and I've gotten that statement that you made earlier about me speaking out. I'm only speaking on behalf of the women.
Yeah.
And I always keep it clear that if I'm advocating for soldiers, I'm advocating for women and men within the Belize Defence Force. And I speak that because although one of the perpetrators is going through the court system, there are still injustices that the Belize Defence Force is trying to put on him as well.
Yeah.
And so I say, and I will always say, as mentioned, culture, because it goes beyond who does it, it goes beyond who the victims are, it goes beyond who the perpetrators are. When you have a system where the senior officers don't know how to channel a report of sexual assault and rape to the police department, that is a culture of rape that is accepted. That senior officers who are there to guide and protect their junior ranking officers do not know how to maneuver these systems, and that's okay within the Belize Defence Force. It's okay for soldiers and officers not to know how to address rape on the level that it is expected to be addressed as per the Defence Act, as per the Force Standing Orders, as per all policies which currently exist.
And I know, Derricia, this is a difficult conversation, but perhaps to give our viewers sort of the full context of what we're speaking about, perhaps you can describe a little bit of, what does actually occur behind the scenes, because we've heard sort of vague allegations or generalized allegations, let me say, of things such as people abusing their power to demand sexual, let's call it, sexual favors or sexual acts, in order to allow persons to move up in ranks. We've heard people to use it as a way to maintain or establish their dominance over perhaps people who are lower in rank, or even just abusing power. So I'm wondering if you can talk to us a little bit about what you observed and what you've heard perhaps that currently goes on in them, and so that we can have a full idea of what we're speaking about and just how rampant the abuse is in the system.
Well, if you start from recruit training, as a recruit, you are told, it was brought out in the report of the recruits not knowing what their rights were and what was expected of them as recruits. As a recruit, you go into the training company and you're told by the training company staff, the first thing, the only right you have is a right hand. That's it. That is something that's embedded in recruits. The only right you have here is the right hand. Okay. They're the judge, the jury, the everything. So we find that a lot of the women are targeted because, one, we are deemed as weaker than the men who enter these training, and then we are coerced to a sense that, hey, okay, well, if you don't do this or you don't do that, this is how I can make this training harder for you. Now, if you're telling a single mother that if you open your mouth about what I'm doing, what I'm telling you, what I'm putting you through, and she knows that she has a child to feed, and this might have been the only job that she could have gotten from the time her child was born, and you're telling her, okay, you have to go, or you're gonna go through this, but if you report this, this is what I can do, or this is how I can get you kicked out of BDF. Because to be honest, the instructors have a lot of power in recruit training. They have the entire Belize Defence Force behind them. As a recruit, I'm still considered a civilian. My reports as the instructor goes to people that I've been working with for almost 8 to 10 years. That would say, oh, they know my character, oh, I'm a training company because I'm of this intellectual capacity, or I've been able to pass so many courses. So it starts from recruit training. And we would say this same recruit would pass out within the ranks, knowing what she endured within the Belize Defence Force recruit training, and would be mixed amongst women who went through the entire same thing, who chose to keep quiet about what happened to them. And when she would look out to reach for someone to get some kind of assistance or support or guidance, she would be told, oh, you're not the only one who did it, or you're not the only one who went through it. We survived. Look at where we are now. Mm-hmm. So that is in itself a culture that has infiltrated the women within the Belize Defence Force. Yeah.
So and that's a very honest way of looking at it, because and that's where a paradigm shift would be needed, just in what will be allowed or how processes will work. Derricia, let's put this into perspective though. the intakes, when there's a BDF graduation ceremony, let's say you have about 100 recruits who graduate from at their ceremony. You maybe have 10 to 15 that are women. So you are underrepresented by any estimation. The hierarchy, the structured hierarchy that exists, those with the top ranks are males. And so they've been functioning in this system for a really long time, and women have been slowly and very importantly injecting themselves into it. But when you're the minority, you're more likely to be taken advantage of, and especially when the higher ups are also males. Explain to me how this plays into the dynamic.
Well, I must make mention that the highest ranking active day-to-day female officer that's within the Belize Defence Force now is a captain, and there are some are waiting to be promoted to major. Mm-hmm. Within the training company itself, the way it's structured is there has to be a female instructor, mm-hmm. If there are female recruits. So if there is at least one female recruit, there will be a female instructor, a female there that is supposed to assist and look out for these women, these recruits. Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of stress has been placed on the men who are at the training company, and little has been paid to the women who were bestowed the responsibility to ensure that these female recruits were taken care of. Because within the training company, there are females all the way up to the rank of sergeant. And you're not given the rank of sergeant just to be there. You're given the rank of sergeant because you have the responsibility of taking care of everyone that's below that rank, including yourself. So I think it's very important to understand that while it's heavily male dominated, there are females who are enshrined within the higher echelon, who have, again, I'm going to use the term the rape culture, who has allowed the rape culture to continue. As a captain within the Belize Defence Force, I understand how difficult it is to speak out. I understand how difficult it is and how much resistance will be made against you when you try to speak out about these injustices within the Belize Defence Force. So I don't expect that there would be much that would be done or would be said. But one thing I did not see in the report that came out was any testimony from any of the female officers who were bestowed the responsibility of taking care of those female recruits that were back there. I did not see any reports from them or any interview with those training staff who were females, who were tasked with the responsibility of not only ensuring these women are equipped, but ensuring that these women are protected at all costs. And throughout, even beyond recruit training, every battalion, every company has at least a female senior NCO or a female officer. And again, I say a part of the rape culture is the fact that these women in the Belize Defence Force, although a couple of them are victims of sexual assault, victims of rape, although I'm here speaking about the fact that the Belize Defence Force has no jurisdiction over trying, investigating, or deeming anyone guilty or not guilty, still believe it's okay to not understand, so what's the right way?
Well, you see, Derricia, that was actually going to be my question. Before we actually get into the report, I wanted to talk a little bit about the system as it currently exists, and you've described several different times the actual rape culture, in your words, that's present in the BDF. Now, maybe you can talk to us a little bit more about what actually happens when there is a report made. If somebody experiences either ongoing or one instance of perhaps rape, sexual abuse, what happens within the department? What sort of systems would have been in place for a person to access some sort of justice? And we know, based on the report, that obviously there's a lot of weaknesses, but in the existing system and a lot of privacy. But perhaps you can go into a little bit more detail about what are the problems that exist.
So a female soldier or officer would make a report.
Yes.
This report would be a written report that would be passed through their officer commanding. Now, the rank of an officer commanding would be a captain, maybe up to a junior major. The report would be forwarded from the officer commanding, and the officer commanding would get a team of people to investigate whatever the allegations were. Although it's going to be sent up, there is no place for a rape kit to be done. There is no place for any kind of thorough investigation to be conducted as per what would be conducted by scenes of crime or by CIB of the police department. It would just be the written testimony and the witnesses, if the female had any witnesses, and also the accused would be able to write a report and then be taken up to from the officer commanding to the commanding officer, who would more than likely be a lieutenant colonel in charge of the battalion, and then forwarded to CBDF. So the OC or the commanding officer would not touch a rape case. They would send it up to the CBDF. When it reaches to the CBDF, now because of the nature of this crime, immediately at the point of OC, what should have been done was referred to the civil authorities. But this channel now would be going all the way up to CBDF, who would try this case without a rape kit, who would try this case without having any tangible
the evidence
support or evidence to whatever occurred. It would be pretty much just whatever reports are there and whatever questions are asked by the CBDF. Now, where the injustice lies on both parties, God forbid the female is being malicious. How do you protect that male soldier without the proper evidence?
Yeah.
God forbid that this male soldier was able to influence some people to actually say, hey, well, we were having a relationship and this and that, because that's the way the stories are usually usually brought out, that something went wrong and now she's crying wolf. That's usually how it goes. Yeah. So once in front of the CBDF, that is pretty much what occurs. The report, and he listens to the testimony, and if found guilty, the guy would be demoted, and that's about it.
Yeah.
And that's
no.
Well,
Sorry.
I don't mean to interrupt you, but I just want to sort of put that in context. So what you're saying is that it basically boils down to one report versus, and then there's a response. So it's more like a he said, she said, for lack of a better term, and that's what the proceedings.
That is it, and that's how all the cases within the Belize Defence Force are dealt with. Yeah. So there's no separation with rape cases or a petty showing up late for work repeatedly. It's going to be the same thing. Now, if we look at the Defense Act, in order for the Belize Defence Force to actually try a rape case, they would have to set up what is called a court-martial system. Yes. And the court-martial system still does not give the CBDF authority to try these cases. Yeah. The judge of the court-martial system would be a Supreme Court judge. To sit and try this case. What would occur is military personnel would be the juror of this case, because of course they know the intimate details of how the Belize Defence Force would work, and would be able to put pieces together to say, okay, this went wrong, that went wrong, this is how it went. But the Supreme Court judge would be the overall judge on that case. And in all my 10 years, I've never seen a court-martial done within the Belize Defence Force. In all my years of asking, I've only heard of one that was done with retired Lieutenant Colonel Lovell, and that's it.
I'm listening to you and I am just thinking, how does a woman subject herself to that? And let me explain, because I think that one of the things that's very missing from the conversation, that's why I tried to put it into perspective that you're already a really small minority in the group, in the overall force. And there is just unspeakable trauma that happens from sexual assault, sexual violence, and from the things that people consider minor to the very serious offenses. There is a trauma that takes place. And to have to endure kind of just having to face your colleagues and continue working with those colleagues and defend yourself for this assault on your dignity and your humanness, it takes an immense amount of bravery, I'd imagine, to even make that report. And then worse, follow through with it to the end.
And the thing is, and it's something I'm challenging everyone to take a look. Maybe it's going to change now because I'm asking people to open their eyes. But the thing is, the alleged perpetrator will always have the full support of the Belize Defence Force. So the alleged perpetrator will have, on the day of showing up at court, will have the force adjutant there with him, will have his company sergeant major there with him. He will have support system throughout the entire court case.
Why do you say that? Just naturally?
It's just, that's the way it's set up. If he goes to court, he has to have his force sergeant major or a representative from his battalion there with him. So just psychosocially thinking about it, before he walks into that courtroom, he can have a conversation about how he's feeling with someone. While the victim has to find a way to make herself available at court, has to go to the court on her own, give her testimony without anyone sitting there and saying, you can do this. Even if it's as simple as that, or we're here for you. As simple as that. So whoever the alleged perpetrator is will have the support of the force. I mean, if you look at this last incident, the perpetrator was taken to the Queen Street Police Station by the force, was supported by the force in going to make his statement. When he was charged and taken to court, he was escorted by members of the Belize Defence Force. And now we have the alleged victim who had to make her own transportation efforts to go and get a rape kit, who had to make her own efforts to go and get a report done at the police station. I mean, that's just the way it's set up. That's what's embedded within this culture that has been allowed to exist within the Belize Defence Force for 42 years.
Let's not forget, you call it a rape culture, and I think within the BDF, but let's be honest, and social media in many ways has allowed us to see parts of ourselves that we perhaps ignored. Every time there's a rape report or a sexual violence report, there's a whole lot of victim blaming that takes place. And these things happen without social media. I'm sure it happens within the force, it happens in wider society. But we get to see how people think. And for someone to go the added steps of pursuing, providing the evidence and the statement and following through and knowing that they can hear all the chatter of the victim blaming that is taking place, again, I go back to it, it makes it harder. So I'm emphasizing this because you said something important last night in the interview that I saw, and you called the report a smoke show, and those are very strong words. But one of the things that you said, it is just lacking in action. There has to be structural changes to make this process simpler. Is that what you're trying to get to? That we need to, that if that isn't in place, it is highly unlikely that you'll prosecute and even weed out false allegations from real allegations and take action.
Yeah, and that's the thing. The system needs to have simple and easily accessible measures for victims to be able to make their reports and for alleged perpetrators to be able to prove that they were either guilty or disprove that they were guilty and prove that they are innocent. Yeah. And within the Belize Defence Force, it's not. Because I'm going to say, in all honesty and truth, the Belize Defence Force, if the cases would be gathered about sexual allegations and sexual assault, there has always been a demotion. So it's never, when they do say that it's not tolerated, that is a true statement. However, it's not the Belize Defence Force that's to tolerate it. I mean, something as simple as every company has an adjutant. An adjutant is the welfare officer. Mm-hmm. That person is bestowed the responsibility to ensure that the soldiers are taken care of psychosocially, are taken care of physically, are taken care of in all aspects throughout the force. And if there is not a set procedure or regulations for the adjutants and the company sergeant majors and all the senior officers to follow, then that's where you're going to see that whatever system is being put in place, because I've been made to understand that they're working on a policy, but without the proper training and without people being willing to step up and advocate for the rights of not only the victim, but the alleged perpetrator, then the rape culture will still exist. It will still exist. Because we are all told that we're officers and we're supposed to be able to manage certain situations. But if we can manage the situations by reading a book and not knowing how to apply them in real life, then there's no purpose.
Well, I mean, I'd venture to say if these women are called and sworn to serve and protect, and they can't do that internally, then you're starting off from a weak point there. Yeah. Derricia, where do you think that this is going to be a turning point? You know, you're retired. I have gotten messages from people saying, "Oh, this has been happening a long time. It still continues. People don't want to come forward. They don't want to talk out." But you are, and we do appreciate that. And those women who did make those reports did speak out. But do you think this is going to be a catalyst for change, or you think it'll just be forgotten in a few months?
I think it can definitely be a catalyst for change. And it's something, again, that we discussed on the interview last night, where the mere fact that we started making noise about the allegations in January, that actually forced the ministry. They called it because they were being embarrassed. But, well, yeah, that's how they termed it. Yeah. But it actually forced the Ministry of National Security for the first time, even if it was not an effective investigation, but for the first time to take these allegations seriously to the point of putting together a team. Now, if what we got out of that investigation is something tangible or that we can work with, that's another question. Yeah. But the thing is, for the first time, public pressure made the Ministry of National Security wake up and say, hey, let's do something. So I believe this can actually be a turning point, because it shows that the Belizean public, we do have a voice, we do have power. And if we use it for the right thing, it's not going to be us against the Belize Defence Force. It's now here where we're looking at the Ministry of National Security to ensure that not only the Belize Defence Force, but the police department and the Belize Coast Guard and all these entities that have women enshrined in these armed forces are taken care of. That these women are looked after, and whatever system is in place, that it is fair and just to both the victim and the perpetrator.
Yes. And I'm wondering what you think, well, when you initially read the report, I'm wondering what your initial thoughts were about the extent of the investigation that was carried out, and whether or not there's any scope, or let me ask it this way, does that report make you feel as though an actual thorough investigation was done with integrity, whereby there could be any sort of meaningful results? And if not, what do you think can be done to sort of improve this situation is moving forward? Because I know it's multifaceted.
Prior to the investigation and the fact that the Ministry of National Security said that they would send a team, I was calling for a transparent and an independent investigation.
Yes.
To be honest, I actually had an ounce of hope when I saw that the National Women's Commission would have been on the investigating team. And I think for me, this investigation has been more disheartening, or the report has been more disheartening, and has left me very confused.
Yeah.
Because I say this because from the products of the investigation, it shows that it was not taken seriously. And there's still a part of the investigation that recommends for an investigation. So what was it that was done? I mean, I would have appreciated an investigation that was completed in June, having overturned all the stones, than an investigation that was finished in March, telling us there needs to be another investigation. And I said I had a lot of hopes in the Women's Commission, because while I was in the Belize Defence Force, I kept referring people to the Women's Commission, let them help us. And now I'm at a point where the Ministry of National Security inserted the National Women's Commission into the Belize Defence Force and told them, investigate this matter. Yeah. And that report was what we got out of it, with the National Women's Commission sitting in there. I felt as though a lot more work could have been done, a lot more questions could have been asked. And it shows a clear misunderstanding of the BDF system, because they're banking a lot on the intelligence unit, the INT. But the intelligence unit has nothing to do with cases such as these. And I will stress that it was channeled to the wrong people, but because the investigating team saw that it followed a procedure, they felt again that procedure was right. So I think there could have been more investigation, there could have been more fact finding.
Yeah, and then you even said, and you had said earlier that you got the impression that they didn't take the investigation seriously. And I think that when one reads the release that was issued last week, a lot of it reads very vaguely, and I'm wondering what your reaction to is even, or do you think that there was even a proper acknowledgement of the extent of the wrongdoing? Because I think the words that were used, and I'm trying to quote, were evidence of some wrongdoing and negligence, and I don't think they fully particularized and went into what exactly happened. So do you think that there has been a proper acknowledgement of what has happened, what is happening in the force?
I believe that, and again, I'm going to say, how can you conclude an investigation that an investigation needs to be done? Majority of the infringements that were identified were deemed as administrative. And I want to call attention to the fact that they were looking into extortion, to sexual harassment, and to wrongdoing. And there were 2 cases of extortion. But yet the Ministry of National Security will say that there's no crime done. Yeah. So the mere fact that that's out there, the 2 cases with the medic having the recruit pay him for a negative drug test, that was a form of extortion, and it was still deemed as an administrative matter. So my thing is, they did this investigation just to say we did an investigation. And I keep stressing that the only reason that press release came out was because the Belize Defence Force knew that this case with this officer, or these 2 officers, was going to the courts. Yeah. So they knew that they had to speak something on the sexual assault and the rape allegations, because that would have been the first question. Something else came up and we haven't heard anything about the investigation. So I believe it was quickly put together just to say we did something. And to be fair, I don't feel the way that they dealt or managed the situation with the recruits could have resulted in any different reports or any different crimes being found. Because now these are recruits who did their entire training. They passed out on the parade square. They had a taste of life at the BDF dance.
Yeah.
And now you're telling me I still can't go home.
Yeah.
Because now we have to deal with this. So
Yeah.
think about the female who reported it and the pressure she got from every single one of her intakes who wanted to go home.
Yeah.
And yet we are to believe that she's going to say, oh yes, this is what happened. I think on a whole, the entire investigating team needs to come out and let us know what is that inappropriate activity that occurred.
But
how can it be fixed if it's just termed as inappropriate?
Even, continuing through with something at the start of your career too, and naturally, you'd think of the fears of what may be to come, especially if you already endured it in recruitment phase. There is so much to discuss, and we just scratched the surface, but I think it's important for us to keep on digging and to find out more and really see some tangible outcomes from what is being described as a dominant culture within the Belize Defence Force. So, Derricia, we thank you for sharing your perspective, and we'll keep on asking the questions.
Thank you.
Thank you. We're going to go ahead and take a break, and when we come back, we are going to be talking to the artist behind the George Floyd mural. That's coming up after the break.